Welcome to the Untangling Web3 podcast, your go-to hub to learn insights and the latest developments in the wild and wonderful world of Web3. I'm Alec Burns.
And I'm Jack Davis. Tune in each week as we navigate and explore the rapidly emerging landscape of the Web3 technologies, projects, and ideas that are shaping the future of the internet.
We'll be talking to the best and brightest in the industry to keep uncovering insights,
so that hopefully we can all learn together on our journey to untangle Web3.
Welcome to another episode of the Untangling Web3 podcast. Today we're joined by Robert Rice, a pioneer in AR, VR, and XR. Robert spent over 25 years innovating in immersive media, shaping interactive technologies, and driving the evolution of the digital landscape. Not only did he coin the term XR, but he's also played an instrumental role in developing spatial intelligence. Thank you for joining us, Robert.
Cool, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you, Robert. This is going to be a great episode, I think, to follow up on our recent Metaverse episode, because we've actually got an expert in the room now who understands what they're doing, instead of someone like me and Alec who are just playing around with these things. You're actually building something in that space. So yeah, I think it'd be great if you could maybe just, I know you said in the pre-room the short version of your background is like maybe an hour long, but maybe what's the shortest version you can give of your background, because I know it's very extensive.
So I've got some gray hair, which means I've been around for a while. I'm an Army brat. I grew up over half in Europe and half here in the U.S., which is kind of interesting. Gives me a different perspective on a lot of things. So went to college. It was going to be I was studying a dual major in music and theology. I was going to be a minister, but things didn't quite work out that way. I dropped out of college, started doing some work for the Army and Air Force Exchange Service as detective for a few years, which was probably the funnest job I've ever had outside of Metaverse stuff. And then one day I decided I wasn't making enough money, so I started a comic book store and selling my friend's collection, because he had a massive collection. And that was great until they killed off Superman. I was like, okay, well, that sucks. Now what am I going to do? And so one day we're trying to figure out, what we're going to do, how to keep the store open. And this random guy walks in. He's like, "Hey, I have a cool virtual reality machine. Can I bring it in your store and test it out?" And I'm like, "Dude, it's a comic book store. You don't have to ask that question. Just roll that right on in here, right? Let's go." And then a few months later, he offered me a job. He's like, "Hey, you know how to use a computer, right?" And keep in mind, for context, this is the super early '90s. Most people didn't even know what email was, right? And I'm in the stockroom picking up girls on CompuServe and Genie and whatever. I knew how to use a mouse, and that was basically the qualification to get started. So I got a pre-release version of 3D Studio and a copy of Deluxe Paint, which is kind of like, just MS Paint on steroids before Photoshop even, right? No manuals. And he was like, "Go figure this out. You're our first 3D artist." And I was like, okay, cool. And there's no such thing as YouTube. So how do I do this? I can't just go to the library, right? So we ultimately ended up building a whole cool VR arcade sort of thing. And I ultimately, hired and trained our art staff. And then one day he comes to me and says, "Hey, Robert, you know how to play an instrument, right?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, dude. I just went to college, jazz band. I'm a saxophonist. Like, what do you need?" He's like, "Cool. You're now our new digital audio effects engineer. So go figure out how to do sound effects." And I was like, wait, what? I don't even know where to start with that. I can play saxophone. That's a far cry from all the other stuff. But I figured it out, and ultimately, I learned a lot, basically. And then I guess around 1995, so I'm still early on in my career. I left there and moved here to Raleigh, North Carolina, to start my own first software company. And we were going to build the world's first real-time 3D, massively multi-user online role-playing game. And this is back when 3D was really 2D sprites in a sort of a pseudo 3D environment, right? And people, it's like 486s were the thing, and Pentiums were starting to come out, and people were like, you can't do real-time 3D on a PC. People will never pay money to play games on the internet. You're a lunatic. And it can't be done. Okay, well, I thought it could be done. Silly me. So I did that for a few years, made a lot of waves in the industry, caught a lot of attention, and companies like Microsoft and Interplay, and when I would fly out here to Raleigh, I'm like, we don't believe you're doing 3D on a PC, and I'm going to trade shows with a VHS tape for a demo, because our workstations are these massive walls of just whatever gateway computers. Like, you can't put that on a plane and just lug it around. So that was kind of how I went from VR into the MMO industry, and I was doing that for a while, and trying to really push and innovate what you could do there. I wrote my first book, and things were too early, basically. So a few more years go by, and I end up advising and consulting other MMO companies, and doing a lot of that sort of stuff. And then I guess around 2008 or so, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. I was looking at technology, and I thought, oh my God, I just came across this amazing demo from AR Toolkit, which is, I guess, based in New Zealand, maybe. And it was basically marker-based augmented reality. It was super slow, super basic, but it was really like eye-popping for me. And I thought, oh my God, if you could just get away from the markers, that would be the thing. You could have 3D stuff everywhere. Like, wow, this is like really cool. So I jumped in, head first to there, and then I decided I started the AR Consortium, which is basically me calling up the CEOs of every other augmented reality company on the planet. And there was like maybe 5 or 6 at the time, right? So it wasn't a huge task. And I was like, hey guys, we got to start a consortium, and like, let's all work together, and let's meet up at all the trade shows for beers. And they all said yes. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm the chairman of the thing, and it's just me and these other guys that are really trying to make AR like an industry. And at this time, augmented reality was mostly just academic research sort of stuff. There really wasn't a whole lot else going on. But yeah, so that's what I got in there early. And it didn't take me too long after kind of going through that process, maybe a few more years, when I realized that, a lot of the technology is the same. 3D is 3D. But in terms of trying to think ahead to the future about the metaverse, and we weren't really calling it metaverse at the time, there really wasn't, kind of a term for it. I thought that you kind of needed to kind of connect them all together. And this ultimately leads, I guess, into the next thing, which is, what is the difference between, AR and VR and MR and all the other sort of acronyms. And if you go and look on like maybe Wikipedia or something, it's generally represented as a horizontal spectrum, where you've got augmented reality on one side, and then you've got virtual reality on the other side. And then in the middle are everybody else's little acronyms for, kind of moving the slider around. And I thought, okay, that's cool, but to really kind of get all the value out of, these technologies and the metaverse and everything else, it should be more like a vertical stack, where you have the real world here at the bottom, and then you've got all your IoT and data and sensors, whatever the next level up, and then you've got augmented reality, kind of giving all those cool visualizations. And then you've got maybe mixed reality, which is the same thing as augmented reality, except more 3D, basically, right? There's not much of a difference.
So you can explain that.
Yeah. So when you say augmented reality, it's generally you're augmenting your reality with something. And kind of the most simplest form of that is, putting text over something else, right? Like if we should all have our names floating over our heads, right? That's easy. Augmented reality, nice and super. And then mixed reality is really more where you've got 3D objects now that have depth, and they're part of the spatial environment that you're in. So it's not just a 3D tag that floats over my head because it's recognizing my face. It may be the 3D flower pot that's sitting on my kitchen table, and I can walk around it and see it from different angles, right?
Got you. So when most people think of this, are they thinking like Pokemon Go? Like that might be one of the most popular examples of this.
Exactly. Pokemon Go is technically mixed reality. Although, in the common vernacular, as I say, everybody just says augmented reality and just leaves it at that. So AR and MR are effectively the same thing for most people. And then you've got VR, which, again, keeping with my vertical stack, we now go to digital twins, which are basically 3D copies of the real world, right? I got a 3D copy of my room or my office or my school. And then above that, we've got created or fictional environments. World of Warcraft would be one, right? It's the full 3D sort of space. So, it's virtual. It's a virtual reality. But of course, most people associate VR with the whole head-mounted displays and all the other sort of fun gear, which is great, except I don't think that you really need that. It adds another level of immersion because you feel like you're there, you can look over your shoulder and everything else. But Call of Duty or World of Warcraft or Second Life or whatever, you can have the same experience with or without the head-mounted display. Right.
Interesting that you're you're referencing a lot of games and game. I mean, I'm a gamer. I can tell from your origin story that you're a big gamer. And do you think that it's gaming that's pioneering this space? Because I see a lot of gamers that are pushing the space, and all the people that I know who are familiar with AR, VR, MR, they know about it because of the gaming space. Do you think that it's now extending to other spaces as well, or why are gamers so I guess key to this?
Yeah, I would say yes and no. On one hand, yes, absolutely, right? I mean, historically speaking, games have really pushed the whole industry. The reason we have huge amounts of RAM and super fast CPUs and even hardware acceleration, GPUs. That's all because of games, right? You want to play a new game, you got to upgrade your computer. If the whole industry was still as it was envisioned early on, where we all have cookbook recipes easily accessible and weather reports on our home personal computers, you really don't need a 12 core the i8 or i9 or whatever. You just don't need all that. And you certainly don't need 32 or 64 gigabytes of RAM and a GPU that needs like an ice box to kind of keep it cool and whatever. I mean, it's like do you really need that 4090 to run Excel? It's like the answer is no, not at all. So from a 3D perspective, yeah, the game industry 100% pushing it forward. But gamers and game designers still think about game stuff, right? So I think this is why. And it's less, let me rephrase that. It's less about pushing 3D boundaries in terms of maybe, frames per second or whatever that might be really important for first person shooter or an FPS. I think the MMO side of the fence is probably the more relevant here because you're dealing with lots and lots and lots of people in effectively shared environments, right? So yeah, you've got a lot of, game mechanics and everything else, but if you strip all that out, I think the important pieces are really on the social side. And this is why so many VR sort of applications now are really centered around social VR, or around content creation, right? I'm going to get a piece of, land or property, and I'm going to build a cool experience here for my friends to come check out. And that's a building, or it's a casino, or it's a hotel, or it's a nightclub. Those are all very, very social oriented sort of things.
Similar to the kind of the model of Habbo Hotel or Minecraft type thing, right?
Exactly. So still social, still exploration, so on and so forth. Actually, if I'm going to go a little old school on you guys, Richard Bartle's gamer archetypes, right? You should totally Google that if you guys aren't familiar with it. So this super amazing dude who's like older than me and probably. You should look him up. Richard Bartle. He came up with the 4 gamer archetypes. And it was basically, as a gamer, each one of us is explorer, achiever, killer, and socializer, right? To different degrees. And you can look at different gameplays. Exploration, that's obvious, right? Achiever, I want to get all the badges. I want to solve all the things. I got to do all the quests. Killer, I just want to hunt things. PvP is my thing. I want to murder people and kill the big orc. It's just the same basic 4 stuff, right? But again, most VR right now is still centered on the social and the exploration sort of aspect, which is fine. But then when you pull out a lot of the gamer pieces, what you're left with is still user to user shared 3D spaces and maybe some collaboration. And when you look at the rest of the industry, the non-gaming industry, where are we at, right? We've got things like Altspace VR. We've got Meta's Horizon, very social, very maybe collaborative, but not quite having a lot of the other creation sort of stuff. Certainly not a whole lot of like actual exploration, right? It's just very small environments. So a lot of the innovation that's happening is either on the 3D rendering side, the technology side, or it's on the hardware side, better head-mounted displays, better monitors, better hand tracking, even better computer vision and all that. And then the industry just kind of stops there. There's not a whole lot of other innovation going on. So a lot of it is rehashing of stuff that's been around for a while, or maybe some, outlier use cases, right? We're using augmented reality to help with spine surgery. Hey, that's super innovative and super awesome for that particular use case. That's not really going to affect regular guys like us, right? Because it's just such a very specific thing. Or there's some amazing stuff that's been going on for firefighters, right? You're in an environment where you can't see anything because there's so dense and so much smoke. But if you've got a right sensor package on you and you've got a cool heads-up display, there are other ways that you can use to determine, hey, I'm in a hallway. There's a hole in the floor in front of me or whatever. I may not be able to see it through the smoke and the traditional visible spectrum, but hey, let's throw in some IR and some UV and some other, I don't know, echo, cardio, whatever. There's other ways to kind of get data and then build a spatial visualization to help me do whatever. And then if I have access to the floor plan of a building, now I know exactly where I'm at, right? And this helps me put out fires faster, be safer, rescue lives, whatever, right? So these are important things. Sure. But outside of that, AR and VR and all the other sort of technologies, which I try to collectively bundle together as XR, right? That's kind of my thing. Is like, look, these are all connected. Okay. Let's call them XR, because I got tired of telling people, hey, I'm doing an AR company and a VR company, and we also do MR in the middle, and IoT plus some AI and the issue of blah 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 blah. And they're like
all the buzzwords.
Yeah, it's like the cool thing about the metaverse is we actually have all the buzzwords and it all kind of makes sense. But it's super overwhelming for people that don't get it. So it's like, hey, man, we're just doing XR. And people are like, well, what the hell is XR? Like, well, okay, let's talk about that. And, when I was trying to, and this was all because I got tired of typing all this up in an email. And I was like, okay, cool. So I got to come up with something new. And I liked X because, if you're a math geek, hey, X, right? It's it's a variable. It could be, it's X, solve for X. But it's also, great for X marks the spot. X is like a, railroad crossing, right? It's also for trans, transcontinental, trans, dimensional, trans, whatever. And also X marks the spot. It's where you find the treasure. I thought, okay, wow, this is kind of cool. I can really play with the whole X thing. And it's also the X on a map. This is where I am. Here, X, right? So I thought, okay, this is it. This is like the thing. The X. Let's go with XR. And I put it my little, it's my Skype tag and my emails and stuff. And after several months or a year, I started seeing other people were using it all over the place. I'm like, hey guys, I had like a little bit of credit here. I emailed you this a year ago. So whatever, it's in the mainstream now.
Apple stole it as well for a product, right? As well, where they call their iPhones XR. So that probably doesn't help now.
Yeah, well, they know where to find me. I can send me a royalty check, but yeah, it's all good. I'm probably still in trouble with Apple. Years ago, I wrote a scathing blog post about what was it? There was like a worm in the apple or something, because I was at the time, Steve Jobs was not allowing developers to access the camera and the iPhone SDK. And if you're trying to do augmented reality, that's an important thing to be able to do. Is I need access to the camera so I can do my computer vision. We ultimately ended up cheating by just taking as many screenshots of the screen as we could, and then using that to kind of
merging them together.
Yes, it's like, okay, well, if I can't have the direct video, I'm just going to screen capture over and over and over and over and over. So we got 3-4 frames per second, but So,
Robert, I was actually going to ask you then, how you define metaverse, and it seems now that you're going to define metaverse as this XR that incorporates everything. Is that the out?
Yeah, I think so. And I'm sure Neil Stephenson is probably not going to be too happy with it. But yeah, it's like, okay, for me, when you sit and ask people, what they think the metaverse is, or even when you talk to industry insiders and say, hey man, what the hell are we building? Where's this all going? Or you say, hey, what's your vision for the future? a lot of times it really boils down to this thing that's bigger than just a 3D world somewhere, or bigger than interconnected 3D worlds. And even the word itself, it's a metaverse, right? Or meta universe, right? It's above and beyond, meta. So I thought, okay, we could certainly go the whole normal 3D virtual world or connected virtual worlds, like Ready Player One's Oasis or something. And those are all cool and they can be very useful and everything else. But I thought there's a bigger opportunity here when you think about everything else. So if you say, okay, look, everything boils down to location, right? Who you are, where you are, what you're doing, and what's around you. If you know those things, you can create some amazing visualizations or experiences with AR, right? Here I am, I'm doing this thing, so show me what I just need to see. Which is great for people that are at a location. But at the same time, you have this other side of the tech where I've got, a 3D, fully immersive environment for where I'm at in the real world, right? I'm at a stadium, I'm at college, I'm in my dorm room, or something along those lines. So if you've got all of those together, why not connect them? They're all using the same data sets. So it's like, okay, cool. So if I can blend all these together, now I've got a thing where, the system or the metaverse, whatever, it knows who I am and it knows where I am. So, give me all this, really cool and useful, data and information. At the same time, for somebody that's remote in another location, let them have access to the same thing, but through the 3D digital twin. And this is kind of, tech that we've specifically been building out. So I may be here, in my office, doing whatever, got my cool AR, going on. You should be able to, go into a 3D metaverse client, right? Log in, make your avatar, do whatever, and then come visit me at my house and walk around my house in full 3D. But things start getting really kinky when, if I know where you are within that 3D digital twin model, right? You're in my office, you're over to my left, you're looking at my bookshelves or whatever. If I know exactly where you are, I know where I am because I'm sitting here and I got my little GPS and my AR on. There's no reason why I can't have your avatar right here as a hologram for me to see. And then also vice versa. You should see my avatar up in my own 3D digital twin space. So you talk to my avatar in VR and I'm talking to your avatar in AR. You can open up a voice connection or whatever. And now it's like, okay, whoa, what just happened here? This is a whole new way to think about the metaverse. I'm taking all this data that's out there, all this information, and I'm bringing it together in one kind of consistent, framework or architecture that now, basically eliminates things like borders and distance. So,
wow. It's very exciting. I mean, that picture you're painting is extremely exciting. And I think you kind of touched on already some of the challenges around, vision in the space, the focus on hardware. And then you also talked about, Apple, the camera, not being able to get into and actually use the recording setting for that. Like one of the things around the metaverse is it kind of implies singular. You mentioned this vision of like it's above everything else. And one of the challenges that's kind of been put out there is around interoperability. You're talking about all these devices working together. What do you think about the challenge of interoperability in this space?
That's a complicated question with a complicated answer, and I have to hold two different opposing views to kind of give you a good consistent view. So on one hand, well, let me step back a bit. So let's use metaverse with a capital M and metaverse with a lowercase m. Okay. So metaverse with a lowercase m is pretty much any metaverse, right? Which most people would define as interconnected worlds, and which people in the industry are basically saying, hey, I built a virtual world and I'm going to call it a metaverse. So that is like, they don't know how to spell properly, right? So they don't even get the capital letters. You can't have a metaverse by that definition unless you have multiple connected worlds. So I'm sorry, Decentraland or Second Life or whatever, you guys aren't metaverses in that respect. But let's set that aside because Robert's picky. Okay. So metaverse is anybody basically with the 3D world at this point, or AR or whatever. So then we've got metaverse with a capital M, and I think that is what I'm talking about. And that's pretty much the entire industry altogether. So even if you have a whole lot of very siloed metaverses, lowercase m, collectively speaking, they're all the metaverse. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
the metaverse, all capitals, doesn't have to be one single architecture, one single company, one single whatever. But I think it's also, we're never going to get to a point where you have this magical, completely decentralized, completely distributed sort of whatever. Even with like the regular internet, you still have to have some centralization. This is why we have ICANN, right? You have to have the authority. Or even in payment processing, I can't just start my own payment processing company and, you know, like own everything. But also, you don't have only PayPal or only Visa, right? I mean, there's a banking system, this whole industry built around payments and stuff, and you can't just enter it in on a whim. There's things and rules you have to follow, and standards you have to adhere to. So I think at the end of the day, the metaverse is going to be all these things together, and the subset of that, there's going to be a lot of cool metaverses with that will be somehow connected to the bigger piece, but only because of some types of interoperability, right? Even like today, all three of us can start up websites. We can use different technologies. I'll use WordPress, and maybe you'll use Joomla or something, or maybe you'll code it by hand or whatever. We use different hosts. Maybe I'll host it at my own computer in my basement. Maybe you want to use, Bluehost or SiteGrounds or GoDaddy. I mean, there's ways, but an end user can go to each one of our websites and have a perfectly good experience because they're using, their favorite browser, which adheres to some standards, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you kind of almost have to think. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think one of the things that I saw that you posted about is that most people, when they think Metaverse, they think Ready Player One and the Oasis. You've mentioned it already. And I think, the ports moving between worlds, how do we get this portability between different worlds? And is the Oasis actually just this standard protocol that operates beneath that allows people to be interoperable between these different worlds? And right now we're kind of seeing maybe the closing off and the walled gardens from the Web 2 that people tend to speak about re-emerging in the Metaverse.
Yeah, I think it's still a little complicated. Most of the people that I've talked to in the industry over the last couple of years, and there's a lot, especially like from the crypto side. You talk to any crypto bro out there, he's going to be like, "Oh, decentralized everything." It's like, okay, yeah, that sounds cool, but it doesn't actually work that way, right? So when you talk to guys about interoperability, they almost always come back down to the whole, hey, we're all trying to work on a 3D standard. GLTF, OBJ, FBX, whatever, 3D standard for file format. And even guys like, like NVIDIA or Autodesk, I mean, they're pushing really hard with some amazing technologies, like what's the standard scene descriptor, all that sort of fun stuff. And that's great, provided that everybody's using the same 3D technology. Okay, well, maybe I don't want to have, full-on Unreal, epic 3D. Maybe I just want to have simple Minecraft, or maybe I want to go, very simple web-based, something like most of the quote metaverses out there, like Decentraland or whatever, CryptoVoxel, Sondium Space. This one's right in the browser, and as a result, you get super low fidelity, low quality graphics, but there's still technically a metaverse, right? So, okay, cool. Well, how do you think about that? And even if you did have something where you had an agnostic client, that might be a browser or might be a desktop application or something, you still have this, maybe I got my 3D graphics good to go. But what if we're talking about migrating from, say, Second Life over to World of Warcraft and then on to Call of Duty? But good luck with that, buddy. Right? It's like, okay, so my cool rabbit-eared, the French-made outfit wearing, avatar chick in Second Life is not going to suddenly show up in World of Warcraft and not immediately get kicked out by all the role players, right? So what are we going to go to Call of Duty and run around my little magical, heart wand, right? That's not going to fly either. Somebody's going to take some pot shots at me, and I'm not going to be happy because I'm just here spreading the love. And why are you shooting at me, right? So interoperability in that sense is just not going to work. You have to think of it, even if it did. Let's just say you could, right? So I'm going to take my level 90 necromancer out of World of Warcraft, and I'm going to go over to Diablo 4 or 5 or 6 or Diablo VR, right? And people are like, okay, cool, that's cool. You got your necro over here, guy, but your skills are all wrong. And what's up with your stats and your power level is like ridiculous. Like this is like, whoa, dude, you just like one-shotted that other guy. Like he's been here for 4 years working his character, right? So interoperability is like, you guys, it's not just about the tech, it's about the content. So
it's like a Mario Kart, Mario just
right.
wanders into the
Luigi,
battlefield and gets,
Yeah,
killed
can you imagine a little
immediately.
Luigi guy rolling around in Diablo right now? I mean, so if you're a gamer and a game designer, or particularly in a role playing side of the fence, if you've been around for a while and think about some of the older systems like GURPS or Champions, where you didn't just grab some dice and roll out your D&D character, you had a point based system, and like Champions, for example, I can throw a firebolt at you, or I can throw a lightning bolt at you, or I can throw a water blast, right? Those are different elemental effects. I'm still going to do, 1d4 of damage. So it's okay, cool. So let's separate out the effect versus the attack type. It's a range attack, it's whatever. So when you do things like this, now you've got things where you can kind of do this conversion. And some people that are like super geeks are like, okay, cool. How do I do Iron Man in D&D? I got to sit down and figure out some kind of conversion sort of level. And I think that, for metaverse interoperability, you kind of have to do the same thing on the content side. If it's super easy to earn experience in game A, there has to be some kind of conversion to map that character over to game B. So in the whole, Ready Player One Oasis sort of metaverse style, when I want to go from one world to another, I have to, do some conversion of my items, my character, whatever. So maybe some things I can't take with me, or they have to go on hold, or the power structure gets converted. Yeah, so what does that mean? That means that the things that can go across everywhere should be basic, like my identity, right? Or some other sort of basic things. And then my objects, my content, my whatever, the other things have to be kind of thought through and kind of considered there. And I think we'll ultimately get there, but at least for now, again, everybody's so worried about Pokemon Go or when the next wearables are coming out. There's not a whole lot of people that are really trying to think about what does it actually mean to be interoperable, or what does the metaverse in the next 2, 3, 5, or 10 years actually look like. And unfortunately, so many people that, raised money or did, whatever in the last 2 or 3 years, especially during COVID, it went heavily towards the crypto side, heavily, NFTs, Decentraland, buy my token, whatever. That it kind of overtook a lot of the metaverse conversation. Right now, if I go out and tell somebody in metaverse, the first question they ask me is, which chain are you using, and can I bring in my NFTs? And I'm like, okay, wow, dude, this is the wrong conversation. Those are subsets, right? If you talk to a metaverse company and the first thing out of their mouth is buy their token, they're not a metaverse company. They're a token company wrapped in a metaverse for marketing purposes, right? Yeah. And then on the other side, you've got all these, get rich quick guys. I got a fresh marketing degree. I'm a business guy. I've got some money, whatever. I want to get into the metaverse and throw some money at it. That's cool, but they have no concept what they're getting into. You have to bring pretty much every discipline you can think of into a true metaverse company, right? Because it's about location, it's about social, it's about collaborations, computer vision, all this stuff. Then you got all the IoT and blockchain, and then we haven't even started talking about AI yet, where that comes into play. So you have to have a much deeper, bigger picture, and you need to understand things like the game industry. You have to understand MMOs. That's the closest thing to the metaverse is these, thousands and thousands of people in shared 3D spaces. And then you also have to back out and look at like spatial computing and understanding the world that's around us. All these cool self-driving cars and drones and all that stuff. That's all using augmented reality, computer vision technology. I mean, that's important stuff that's in our daily lives already, that most people really aren't even kind of aware of.
So Robert, I'm really curious then, where does your company Transmira and your Omniscape platform sit in all this? Because I'm conscious that we really saw kind of the background and why you got into AR and metaverse in the beginning, but you founded Transmira coming up to 10 years ago now, I believe. So
I was hoping you were going to mention
that. Sorry.
No, it's okay. So I incorporated in 2014, right around the time that I was thinking about XR, because I thought, hey, this is where the industry is going to go, and nobody else is thinking about it yet. So I spent a few years in my basement, rereading all the books, rewatching all the movies, and spending a lot of time really trying to just think about it, right? What are all the cool use cases? What should things look like in 10 or 15 years? And then when I had that kind of in my head, then the next question was, okay, well, how do you build that? And I tried deconstructing this grand vision of all, everything, everywhere, all connected and, augmented virtual, and then work backwards. And that kind of gave me a really nice technical roadmap, I guess. But it also helped me identify areas that haven't been done yet, which is a great way to start, developing IP, but also trying to not only figure out how to do things, but also how to solve some problems. So I feel like, the first couple of years that I was at this, I went through those mental exercises, and I think that we've come up with some really cool solutions to problems that people haven't even, contemplated yet, which is cool for me, but also not so cool because I have to explain things to everybody to kind of get them to where, where I've been. So I don't know, maybe it's around 2017, 2018, started raising a little bit of money, building a little bit of a team, and kind of really working on just some basic stuff. And we really didn't hit our stride until maybe, after COVID started, maybe 2020, right? And even then we had COVID, so that just slowed everything else down. So I'm trying to crawl and go faster, but it was really hard trying to raise funds, really hard trying to find the right people with the right mindset and the right talent. And it's like, I can't just hire a guy off the street. You really have to sit down, spend a few hours with me, understand what we're doing, but also why we're doing it. And then when you kind of get all that, it's like, okay, wow, now I understand it. Now let's go for it. So in trying to think about that, you also have to make money, and you have to convince investors that, hey, we're going to do something interesting here. So I can't just go out and say, hey, I need $100 million and I can change the face of, humanity and history and all these other sort of things. It's like, oh no, I need like 50K, or I need, $1 million so I can build out an augmented reality application for brands, because that's step one, right? So on one hand, we've been kind of doing it really slow, doing these little things, and we filed a couple of amazing patents. And one of the first things we were doing, just trying to kind of communicate this to people, we just had to boil it down to, hey, it's Pokemon Go for brands. And that would at least give me a conversation with somebody like, oh, I understand Pokemon Go. My kids play that. That sounds interesting. How does that work? And then, I can lead them into these little baby steps. It's like, okay, cool.
Like Pokemon Go is the metaverse equivalent of Uber in like everything else. They say Uber for X. In Metaverse, yes. It's Pokemon Go for X.
That's exactly it. And that's honestly the only way to really communicate with probably 95% of the people on the planet, right? And for us, it was like, okay, well, I've got to do all these things. I've got to come up with some value proposition, something that's easy and quick now. But also, I don't want to give up on the bigger picture, because I think this is important stuff. So we focused on monetization. Good luck finding people out there that their business is, how do you monetize the metaverse? There's not a lot of them, right? And for me, I thought, okay, well, to monetize something, you basically, it boils down to transference of value, right? Commerce to some degree. And commerce doesn't always mean I'm spending money at the store. Commerce means, I'm commercing. I don't know. I lost where I was going with that, but it's an exchange of something. So we developed some IP that basically, we can link a 3D object in AR, VR, whatever, to something in the real world, right? Product, asset, merchandise, credit, voucher, special offer, coupon. I mean, whatever. And it's basically, think about an NFT. But better. And we came up with this years ago and filed a patent for it in 2018. So, and we won the patent, by the way, just FYI for all your listeners. But thanks. So many people owe me money, but I was like, how do I go after these guys, right? So the idea though there is that, if I'm in the metaverse, again, AR, VR, and I have some 3D object that's cool. It's cool if it's tokenized and unique and all that. That's fun. But if it's actually representative of something in the real world, so I get Pokemon Go for brands. My favorite example is like, let's say Starbucks. I should be able to go outside hunting around and, hey, look, there's a 3D Starbucks coffee cup rotating in air and augmented reality. I should be able to pick it up. Hey, oh my gosh. But then I should be able to go to Starbucks and then go up to the counter and then exchange that for an actual cup of coffee, right? 3D object equals a free coffee, something physical, tangible in the real world. Or maybe it's a discount, or it's buy one coffee, get one coffee free, or whatever. So That's number one, and that's important, and that could just as easily be the title to a house, right? Or access to something. It's whatever. It's something physical in the real world that has a 3D, component in the metaverse that it's equal to, and that suddenly opens up a lot of interesting things, even for like supply chain or data viz or whatever. But from a brand's perspective, being able to geolocate content anywhere in the world and kind of target their ideal customer, that's huge. So now maybe Starbucks wants to go after all those McDonald's, Dunkin' Donuts coffee lovers. So I'm going to put 3D Starbucks coffee cups in the parking lot of every, Dunkin' Donuts and McDonald's Mac Cafe that's out there, right? That's nice. That's like dirty pool, right? But hey, whatever, it works. So now people are finding that content and picking it up, and they're going, oh my gosh, I got a free coffee. But then it's like, okay, cool. We're dealing with 3D objects now. This isn't like, Groupon, where I'm going to spam you with an email that says, hey, this email is worth, a discount, or here's a coupon. By linking that 3D object to something in the real world, people psychologically deal with this differently. It's like, wow, this is a 3D thing. I can interact with it. I can spin it around. So in their brain, they start attaching real value to the 3D thing. It's like, okay, wow, this is equal to something else. This has real value. So now you're in a place where you can really start pushing brand awareness, brand prestige. Hey guys, I got one of the only, Nike 3D drops, or, whatever, and you got a crappy Adidas one. I mean, whatever, right? So now if I were to send you a Groupon coupon I got in the mail, you're like, hey, instant spam, I'm not even going to read it. But if I sent you a 3D object that was worth a free coffee or a free Domino's pizza, who doesn't want, 3D Domino's pizza box, right? You're going to be way more thankful, and like there's some value there. But then if we start tracking everything like on blockchain, from the very first impression, I found it, I picked it up, I transferred it to Jack. Jack didn't like it. He sent it to Alec. Alec goes to Starbucks and redeems it. And by tracking all that, I get this crazy amount of amazing, consumer behavior data, right? Beyond what even Nielsen can even get. But because we're tracking it and it's on blockchain for, we can verify it. We're like the only company in the world that can prove and validate the ROI on somebody's ad spend. You can spend $1 million. Yeah. Think about that, right?
Very exciting, right? Yeah.
You can spend $1 million on a commercial on TV or the internet or whatever, and get likes or, whatever. And maybe your sales go up by 1%, but you can't directly link or correlate that advertising to that increase in sales. It could be for any other reason, but in our particular case, you spend $1 million here, you make 1.2 million over there, and you can link it back. So now you've got, CMOs going to their CEO and say, hey, I made you this much money. I need a bigger marketing budget now. It's like, well, okay, well, how do you can't argue data,
That's
right?
Perfect problem, right? And I'm glad you've touched on a lot of these concepts. You've touched on blockchain, tokens, verifiability, auditability, all these things. And this is going to be one of my next questions. Is the metaverse is hard to define. Web3 is hard to define. How do you see the metaverse interacting with Web3? What's the relationship there in your mind?
A lot and nothing at the same time. Web3 is still, depending on who you talk to, it's still a little bit of an ideology as opposed to something that's a little tangible, right? You can get, just like with Metaverse, you can get 5 different definitions from 5 different people. But if you, I guess, go with one of the more generalized versions of, for Web 2, you're the product, right? And for Web 3, I don't want to be the product anymore. So it's a little more about privacy and like consumer control, right? I think that's where you really start seeing the lines get blurred or kind of where people are going. So I think for the metaverse, it's like it's 6 of one and half dozen of the other, right? So in some senses, you have to give up your privacy because the system or the platform or the game or whatever, it needs to know who you are. It needs to know where you are and what you're doing, right? That's just critical. Same thing for commerce and everything else. There has to be something there. But on the flip side of the coin, these are also opportunities where I should be able to go from location to location or system to system or world to world or experience to experience and be able to maintain anonymity and have control and be a content creator. I should be able to create an amazing experience, in AR, VR, whatever, but I should also be able to turn around and monetize that and build something, right? So the metaverse and Web3 should be very, very positive and beneficial towards independence and also creators. And we're seeing some of that, with the migration from Web 2 to Web 3 for sure. And there's a lot of conversation around smart contracts and extended royalty payments and creator rights, whether you're a musician or an artist or whatever. But just also an equal amount of trampling on those rights, because this is still such a wild west, and there really is no defined standard for everything just yet. And then now we're also at the risk of the regulators and the politicians getting involved, which is not a good thing, because they tend to not know what the hell they're talking about, or they have special interests whispering in their ear, and they make what sounds good to them, and they're honestly trying to do good. They end up quashing things. I mean, look at like blockchain and crypto right now with the SEC and all the other sort of things going on, right? There's even in the last year, it hasn't been a crypto winter, it's been a crypto apocalypse. And I still occasionally see guys on Twitter that are like, oh yeah, BTC to $100,000 in 6 months. I'm like, yeah, buddy, okay, so you overinvested and you're waiting for some other sucker to come in and raise the price so you can sell out, right? Yeah, so try again later. But this is where it's like it's important for the community as a whole. It's not so much about setting standards per se. It's about building stuff, getting out in the market, and getting adoption. Because if you can get that far, that's what's going to be the standard. It's not going to be a couple of academic guys in a room or a couple of big companies, like Microsoft and Google or whatever, and Apple kind of all huddling up and say, hey, here's the standard for the internet. Yeah, thank you. That just is good for your interest, right? But you also can't rely on the regulators. So we need to spur and incentivize innovation as much as possible, build things, win, lose, or fail, just get it out there, and then let the market determine what works, what doesn't work, and let's let those be those standards. But even then, those builders, those developers, and those designers and startup founders and all that, you have a responsibility to be thinking about the implications of what you're building and how you're building it, and how it's going to work. Because at the end of the day, I think those standards are going to come from whatever wins the adoption race, and it's either going to be a dystopian nightmare because somebody got greedy and they're just throwing crap at the wall, and it just happened. Like TikTok, for example, right? TikTok is amazing and useful and super fun and happy and exciting, but it's also a very, very, very dark side to TikTok, right? For all the political and whatever sort of reasons. But that's a case where user adoption is setting the market tone. But it wasn't necessarily designed or developed with everybody's best interest at heart.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up adoption, actually, because because when we're talking about the relationship between Web3 and Metaverse, I think I like the idea of it's everything and nothing. But at the same time, you saying that Transmira is kind of the only company in the world that can do what you're doing, and it seems to me like where technologies in Web3, like the blockchain, the NFT side, the digital twins, these are all things from the Web3 world that are allowing you to have this kind of unique value proposition. Then it's the question that how do you ensure that this value proposition becomes more valuable by growing, and it's kind of using the network effects, and this adoption challenge is going to affect you as much as anyone else, I presume, right?
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, for me, I've got a small team, which is it's fine. But it's like I can only go so fast. And with what we're trying to build, it's pretty big and it's pretty significant. And you can't build it all at once, because then it gets super complicated. And as an example, I think Meta tried to build it all at once, and we all saw how that turned out in like less than 12 months, right? That was, there's other reasons there for that, but you just have to keep, just do stuff and, keep adding it to it. So we've got, our own little roadmap, and we're going to be, we're kicking out a few other things over the summer, and it's not going to be like, oh my God, completely groundbreaking. For example, we're launching Metaverse apartments here, probably by the end of the summer. So free Metaverse apartment for everybody. It's yours. You can decorate it however you want. Go to our marketplace, buy some stuff from there. Yay for us, empower to the creators. You make your 3D furniture, put it in the marketplace. Some other guy's going to buy it for his little apartment. It's going to be fun and cool. And it'll probably be really awesome for the first week, and the people are going to get like, well, this is boring as hell, and I want more content, or I want to do more things. And hey, it's coming, right? But we're a small company, but you just start with this, hang with us, and the more users I get, the more, revenue we get, the more investment money we get, the bigger the team gets, the faster we work, right? So
just make sure you launch those in the UK, because that's the only place anyone can afford a mortgage right now. Is in the metaverse, I think. So we desperately need that at the minute.
Yeah, well, yeah, for sure. Well, we're very global minded to start with. So yeah, 100%.
So Robert, you've talked about, you have a kind of a vision of what the future looks like, but you need to deliver these small incremental steps, to be realistic and business minded, commercial, all these things. I'd love to understand what you think the future does look like. What are the opportunities you see? What's the future of the metaverse that you envision?
The future metaverse is me selling out for like $100 billion and buying an island somewhere, right? So whatever it takes to get there, sign me up. No, I think it's kind of what I was saying before. For me, it's everything together. I would like some kind of consistent where, I've got augmented reality around me in my daily life to help me do things and learn about my environment or accomplish my tasks or goals. But at the same time, you leverage in the 3D or the VR stuff, right? So for example, what's a good example? So let's say, so I used to live in Kentucky in Louisville, and for a brief stint, I was a security guard at the Mall of St. Matthews on Hurstburn Lane, right? Super nice mall, but it was a long time ago. And the mall has mall hours, opens in the morning and closes in the evening, and that's it. But with the metaverse, you think about, cool. Well, if you have a digital twin of that mall, right? So I got a 3D copy of the mall, and let's fully enable it with commerce, and let's link each one of those stores back to their own websites, or let's do 3D stores for each one of the stores within the mall or whatever. That's all super cool and awesome. But now if you think about kind of this whole idea of a holistic metaverse where we're blending AR and VR together, that means that during the day I'm walking around the mall and there's other holograms running around that represent other people in other countries or whatever, checking out the mall and buying stuff, which is pretty cool. And then you take that a step further and think about how does the metaverse become better for the world and more than just these cool experiences? How does the metaverse deliver the promise that the internet was supposed to have, right? The internet was supposed to be the great equalizer, and the web was supposed to be, easy access to everybody. And of course, they were taken over by porn and social media. Like, yay. So I have the entirety of mankind's knowledge at my fingertips in seconds on my phone. And I'm going to be spending all my time looking at porn on TikTok, right? So it's like, whoops, so we missed the boat there. But can the metaverse change that? And I think it can. So, if you imagine a single mom in the Philippines, what's her economic future look like, right? It's pretty dim. But what if, she can get online, have an avatar or whatever, and then get a job working at the 3D digital twin of the Mall of St. Matthews. So, lunchtime for her in Manila is basically middle of the night for Kentucky, but you can keep that mall open. So she can basically be that VR, customer service sales avatar walking around whatever store selling, 3D Nike virtual goods to some guy in Russia that wants to go and, convert that over to an actual real pair of shoes later on somewhere else. So, this idea of metaverse, when you combine AR and VR and digital twins and IoT and all these other sort of things together, you end up creating incredible opportunities and experiences for tourism or hospitality or retail or sports or education or office collaborations. Like all the things that we talk about and dream about suddenly become possible when you build things in this particular sort of fashion.
So you see it as kind of an economic tool for things like employment and growth for economies. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even like in the last 6 months, I've talked to several, larger companies. They're like, hey, we expect another pandemic. It's going to happen 2 years, 5 years, 20 years. There's no one's coming. And, lessons learned from this first one, people are going to be stuck at home and we need them to work. And remote work is cool, but it's not necessarily the greatest. So what are some problems there? Well, employee training and onboarding and, all that sort of stuff is tough. Same thing for collaboration. How many people here love spending several hours a day in Zoom? like zero. Zoom sucks, right? Just pure video, it just really sucks. But you pull that same number of people, and I guarantee you, if you're a gamer, you've probably spent a stint of say 6 to 18 hours straight in some 3D MMO somewhere, and you didn't want to get out. You were like, no, I don't need to leave the chair. Give me a bottle, and I'll take care of business here. I gotta wait for this thing to drop, right? When were you like that last about work? I can't ever think of a time. So when you think about the metaverse as more than just social, and you think about how can it replace or enhance or augment to whatever my life and make it a better sort of way, then it's like, okay, cool. How do I make money on the metaverse? How do I reach other people? How do I learn more? How do I have experiences that I can't have any other way? It's cool that I can go to Second Life or Decentraland. That's fun. But what if I can go to Berlin, a 3D version of Berlin, and walk around and feel like I'm actually there, right? Well, when you start throwing, Unreal 5 and satellite data and all these other sort of technologies in, that's absolutely possible. I can give you a near photorealistic experience of exploring Berlin like I was actually there. And then when you start layering that in with other people that actually live in Berlin, now like I'm making friends in Berlin and I'm learning German. I can't move there, right? But now I can have the experience of almost being there, which means it's going to be easier to learn about the culture, or learn a language, or find somebody, make friends, get married, or get a job offer. The metaverse can be that equalizing tool that suddenly, like I said, it gets rid of borders and boundaries and opens up the whole world to you. Again, if it's more than just me running around Second Life or Decentraland. Those things are still important. I still want to have, my own 3D flying castle, with laser sharks for my friends to kind of, come hang out at. But that's cooler if I can link it back to my real house, right? Or my real location. So again, there's that vertical stack. But in terms of the power of the metaverse, I think it's this combination of the real world and AR and these digital twins kind of all working together, and then everything else, kind of built around that.
Well, I think that's like a really a powerful kind of message to end on, I think, because I'm conscious of your time, Robert. You've got 16 hours to spend in Doom by the sounds of it. But yeah, it's been a really interesting conversation. I think we could carry on for maybe another 16 hours. But before we let you go, we always ask our guests 2 questions right at the end. Now, the first of these, I think you've already kind of done a good job of, but I think we'll let you have another stab in case there's anything you wanted to do. But first question would be, in just one sentence, what does Web3 actually mean to you?
Oh, one sentence. I'll go back to what I said earlier. I think, Web 2, you are the product, and Web 3, it's the other way around. I think Web 3 is going to empower the user and kind of bring back the potential of the internet as a whole, with disclaimers.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's something we've also kind of subscribed to ourselves on the podcast, and we like to ask everyone that question because we want to see over time, how these answers change as well. So yeah, it's good to see we're all aligned on this one today. And then the kind of second question, just to close everything off today, then. So, if you could pick one person, anybody in the world, any time in history, to sit down and discuss Web3 and Metaverse with, who would be your choice?
You're giving me all of history, though, which means I'd have to explain Web3 and the Metaverse to whoever it was that was talking to. Oh man, that's a tough one. You know what? I'm gonna go a little different here. I'd have to flip a coin and choose between Nikola Tesla and Einstein. Nikola Tesla, because dude was like brilliant, right? And I would blow his mind, and he'd be like, "Wait, what?" Because that would just be a fun conversation, right? That guy was crazy. But I probably, what? I think I would go with Einstein, because when you think about Einstein and physics and E equals mc squared, whatever, the guy understood dimension and space and time and all that. And I think having the conversation with him was like, hey, let me tell you about this metaverse thing. I think his mind would just pop and go, wow, okay, that's like, now we can figure out the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth dimensions are. And, it's like,
do you think he'd just get it instantly? He'd just be there. He'd be like, yeah, I knew this was going to happen naturally.
Yes and no. I think it would take me about an hour kind of walking through PCs and other sort of things. But the idea of the metaverse, you can boil it down to media like TV, right, or moving pictures, as they say. It's not a far cry to walk somebody through. It's like, okay, cool. This is just kind of the another type of mass media to kind of get there. So.
Well, thank you very much, Robert. This has been an incredible episode. We've been talking about the metaverse with Robert Rice. Thank you for listening. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Untangling Web3, produced by Emma Camilleri.
Don't forget to send us your thoughts, questions, and comments on social media. And be sure to follow us on your favourite podcast provider to catch the next episode. See you next time to untangle a little bit more of Web3.
The views we express here are our own and do not reflect the views of our employers.